pastor's down on vacation. We got Glen Hossler. He's going to come and deliver us a message. Woo!
Hey, thank you, worship team. For some reason, I feel like I belong with you guys. I didn't bring it, but you know, for some of you that don't know, a lot of times when Ashley and her worship team lead worship out at our camp meeting, they let me join them when I bring my saxophone along. So love having you worship and love being here. And good morning. Thank you for the invite. It's good to be back. I got to thinking on my drive down here, I came to Salem 34 years ago, and the first place that I preached outside of my pulpit in Oak Park Church in Salem was actually right here. We did a regional thing before we had the regions. We had Woodburn and Albany and us were getting together for a few things, and Pastor Dave Stroud asked me, he said, Glenn, why don't you bring the message for the gathering we had? So the first time I ever preached outside of my pulpit here in Oregon was right here. And some of you I've known for a long time, all 34 years. Some of you, like Dave and Connie, I go all the way back to college with. So good to be here. I told Connor I was going to pick on him. So Connor, last night, oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to pick on you. That's your thing. Last night I had a dream, and I want you to tell me what that dream was.
Got it.
Okay?
So, there you were.
Yeah.
Fighting off a horde of bears.
Wrong. Try again.
Okay. It was not bears, it was teddy bears, sorry. I was trying to give you a little bit.
Wrong. Try again. Now this is serious. You're a leader of this church,
Yeah,
right?
no, I'm trying.
Yeah, and as a leader of the church, you're supposed to be really smart
Yeah.
and know a lot of things.
Also very humble.
So I want you to tell me what my dream was, because if you look, I've got a lot of pull in the state. If you don't tell me what my dream was, maybe I'll go to the credentials board and say, hey, you know that Connor guy? I think you better just.
Yeah. It was probably you had a dream about bullying me. That's probably
That's close enough. Actually, that's the dilemma that a young man named Daniel faced. And today and next Sunday, I'm going to be preaching from the book of Daniel. Actually, Connor told me that Pastor Dave has this thing where if he picks on Connie, he has to buy her a new dress. But he hasn't told me his dress size, so I really don't know what I'm doing. Well, Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, conquered Judah and its capital city, Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar was gathering the treasure, all the hoards of plunder and hostages in Judah, when an emergency call came from Babylon that his father had died and he needed to go back home. Among the hostages, Nebuchadnezzar took with him back to Babylon were Daniel and his three friends, whom we mostly know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, Daniel was from a royal family, and he was only a teenager at the time, as were his three friends. And they were forced to travel some 1,500 miles from Jerusalem to Babylon. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a smart political leader, and he chose the most gifted princes and young men from Judah, and he planned to train them up as political leaders. So Daniel is now in Babylon, where he has been chosen to be trained to be a leader because of his physical and intellectual abilities. Well, apparently, he and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who we really usually know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had passed their training with flying colors, and they were now among the king's counselors and advisors, his wise men. Well, in the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream which troubled him so much that he couldn't sleep. So, now, Nebuchadnezzar was not just one of the greatest kings of Babylon, but he was one of the greatest world leaders of all time. In fact, he was the first world leader that we're aware of to conquer the entire civilized world, including what we now call Italy, all the way around to Egypt. And he was the one that built that ancient, beautiful city of Babylon, you know, one of the ancient 7 wonders of the world, which remains today some 50 miles or so from Baghdad in Iraq. I'm going to have us read some verses from the 2nd chapter of Daniel. So the king summoned the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came and stood before the king, he said to them, "I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king in Aramaic, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Who were these guys? They were the wise men. It says they were sorcerers and astrologers. These were the men who tried to read the future in the stars. Just as today there are astrologers who try to do that. These were the highly educated advisors of the king, but they used false and phony sources to get their information. Somebody said it's a little bit like a cross between a lawyer and a fortune teller. They were the king's counselors. They were Nebuchadnezzar's advisors, but they used fortune telling. Let's continue reading in Daniel. The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses will be turned into piles of rubble." You're getting off the hook easy, Connor. "But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So, tell me the dream and interpret it for me." In other words, Nebuchadnezzar is saying, "I'm not going to tell you what the dream was. You're supposed to be so smart. You're supposed to be so special. You're supposed to be so wise. Come on, you tell me what the dream was and interpret it." I think old Nebuchadnezzar was pretty shrewd. I think that he had already begun to suspect that these guys were phonies. He's likely thinking, I'm going to put these guys to the test and see if they can really do something special, something supernatural. See if they can tell me what I dreamed and what it means. Let's keep on reading. Once more they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." Then the king answered, "I'm certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided, that if you do not tell me the dream, there is just one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There's not a man on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among men." See, the Babylonian culture worshiped gods, small g, plural. But those gods were impersonal powers and forces. They had no personal relationship with the people. And I just want to pause here for a moment and say, aren't you glad that we have a personal God who knows us, who loves us, who wants to help us, and who actually does live among us? Amen. Amen. But they did say one thing that was correct. No man could do it. Let's keep reading. Well, this made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. See, Daniel and his other teenage friends, maybe they were in their early 20s by now. I'm not sure how long the training took for them to reach this level of being a part of the council of wise men. But They had come through the king's special training school, and they had excelled so much that they'd been promoted to this council of the king's wise men. And so now they're among those whom the king has said is going to be killed because of their inability to interpret his dream. As we keep reading, when Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. I want to stop here for a minute. I love that. He spoke to Arioch with wisdom and tact. Folks, when we talk to people, we should seek to have wisdom and tact. You have a class called Go Tell. You know, how do you do that? When do you do that? You need wisdom and tact when you do that. Pastor Dave Dyke says, you know what wisdom is? Wisdom is the ability to say the right thing. Tact is the ability to say it the right way. I love that. And that's what Daniel had. We'll keep reading. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. What did they do? They prayed. I think God had a theme for today. They prayed. When you face problems, what should you do? Pray. When you're facing the impossible and you need help, you should pray and ask God for help. This is a true story. It's a fascinating story. Brenda was a young woman who was invited to go rock climbing. And although she was scared to death, she went with her youth group to a tremendous granite cliff. In spite of her fear, she put on the gear, took a hold of the rope, and started up the face of that rock. Well, she got to a ledge where she could take a breather. As she was hanging there, one of the safety ropes snapped, flicked against Brenda's eye, and knocked out her contact lens. Well, here she is on a rock ledge, I don't know, maybe hundreds of feet above and 100 feet below her. Of course, she looked and she looked all over that ledge, hoping that the contact lens had landed there, but she couldn't find it. It just wasn't there. So here she was, far from home, her sight now blurry. She's desperate. She began to get upset like any of us would, and so she prayed. She prayed to the Lord to help her find it. And then, because there wasn't anything else to do, she struggled to keep on climbing. And she actually got to the top. And when she got there, her friend examined her eye and her clothing, helping look for the lens, but there was no contact lens to be found. So she sat down, despondent, and with the other climbers that were already there, waited for the rest of their group to make it up to the top of the cliff. And as she sat there waiting for them to come, she looked out with blurry vision across the range of mountains. And she thought of that Bible verse that said, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth. And she thought, Lord, you can see all these mountains. You know every stone and leaf, and you know exactly where my contact lens is. Please, help me find it. Well, finally, after all the group got up there, they walked down the trail to the bottom. And at the bottom, there was a new party of climbers that were just starting up the face of the cliff. And one of them shouted out to the group that was just descending and said, hey, you guys, anybody lose a contact lens? Well, that would be startling enough. But do you know why this climber saw it? Because an ant was moving slowly across the face of the rock, carrying that contact lens. True story. Brenda's father is a cartoonist, and when she told him the incredible story of the ant and the prayer and the contact lens, he drew a picture of an ant lugging that contact lens with the words, "Lord, I don't know why you want me to carry this thing. I can't eat it. It's awfully heavy. But if this is what you want me to do, I'll carry it for you." I think we need to remember those words when we are faced with something that we feel is just too impossible. First song we sang about impossibilities. When we feel that there is something just too impossible for us, we need to remember the story of Brenda and the contact lens and the ant. And we need to say, "God, I don't know why you want me to face this situation. I can't see any way I can get through it. But if you want me to go through it, with your help, Lord, I will." In James chapter 1, verse 5, it says, "If any of you needs wisdom to know what you should do, you should ask God, and He will give it to you. God is generous to everyone and doesn't find fault with them." So, here's a question for you to think about for a moment. When you're facing the impossible and you need help, besides praying, what else should you do? I thought about letting somebody, a few of you answer that, but I'm not going to do that because I'll lose control, maybe. But think about that for a moment, and if you have a thought, turn to a neighbor and just softly share a thought about maybe, besides praying, what should you do when you're facing the impossible? Okay, I'm going to give you my answer. One of the things. When you're facing the impossible and you need help, you should ask others to pray with you. It says, Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he urged them to plead for mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery. So when you're facing something that seems impossible, don't try to tackle it alone. Yeah, get on your knees and pray. And pray. And pray. But also ask others to pray with you and for you. That's what Daniel did. And I get the impression that they prayed and they prayed and they prayed. They prayed through the night. They prayed until God answered them. We're told in verse 19 that during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. See, God answered the prayer of these four young men, and He gave Daniel the answer that he needed to save their lives. John Maxwell writes in his book, Partners in Prayer, he says, in the summer of 1876, grasshoppers nearly destroyed the crops in Minnesota. So in the spring of 1877, the farmers were worried. They believed that the dreadful plague of grasshoppers would once again visit them and again destroy the rich wheat crop, bringing ruin to thousands of people. Well, the situation was so serious that Governor John Pillsbury, you ever heard of the Pillsbury Company? Minnesota. I lived there for a while. Anyway, Governor John Pillsbury proclaimed April 26th as a day of prayer and fasting for the whole state. And he urged every man, woman, and child to ask God to prevent the terrible scourge from happening again. And on that April day, all the schools and the shops and the stores and the offices were closed. We just had a federal holiday, Juneteenth, where a lot of those things were closed. But they weren't closed so that they could pray. But back then, that's what Governor Pillsbury wanted them to do. Set aside that day and fast and pray. And that day there was a reverent, quiet hush all over the state as the people were urged to pray. Well, the next day, it dawned bright and clear, and the temperature soared to what they ordinarily were in midsummer. We've been having this climate change thing where in a matter of a couple of days, we can go from 60 to 90 almost. Well, apparently that's kind of what happened. It was very unusual for them to get that hot in April. And the Minnesotans were devastated as they discovered, because of this heat, billions of grasshopper larvae wiggling to life. And for 3 days, the unusual heat persisted, and the larvae hatched. And it appeared that it wouldn't be long before they started feeding and destroying the wheat crop. But on the 4th day, however, the temperature suddenly dropped, and that night, frost covered the entire state. The result? That frost killed every one of those creepy, crawly grasshoppers as surely as if poison or fire had been used. But it was not a severe enough frost to destroy the crops. Severe enough to wipe out the grasshoppers, but not the wheat. It went down in the history of Minnesota as the day God answered the prayers of the people. So, ask others to pray with you. And sometimes, when you can hardly pray yourself, because I've been there, maybe others of you have been too. When that happens, then that's the best time to ask others to pray for you as well as with you. Because there is power in prayer. I'm so glad that your church is taking a special emphasis in reconnecting with the power of prayer, corporately as well as individually. And as I think about you all, the thought came to me, here you are again, facing the daunting task of needing to find a new pastor. I've kind of shared that experience with you a few times in the 34 years I've been here. But I just want to urge you not to forget perhaps the most important thing you can do as you look for God to provide the next pastor for you. And that's to pray. And pray together. And see what God will do. Because I have personally great hope and excitement for the next chapter of this congregation. I don't believe God is done with you guys yet. And I really look forward to watching how God blesses you and uses you as you trust Him and remain faithful to the calling that He has placed on your lives and this church. So keep praying and let's see what God does. Well, now let's read the rest of verses 19 and 20, because it's going to lead me to my next point. It says, during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. And then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are His. So my next point is, when you're facing the impossible and you need help, you should give God the glory. Make sure that after you've prayed and you've asked God for help and He's given it to you, that you give Him the glory, that you praise Him. When God answered Daniel's prayer, Daniel immediately burst into spontaneous, exuberant praise. David Dyke says, praise is bragging on God. I like that. That's what Daniel did. We keep on reading in the 2nd chapter. It says, He changes times and seasons. He sets up kings and deposes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with Him. I thank and praise you, O God of my fathers. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. I want you to notice what Daniel is saying. He's saying, my prayers, our prayers, have been answered. Now, it actually hasn't been proven yet that those prayers have been answered. That isn't going to happen until he stands before Nebuchadnezzar and tells Nebuchadnezzar what his dream is. In other words, Daniel is acting on faith here when he's praising God for the answer to his prayer, because he had the belief, the conviction that his prayers had been answered. He hadn't seen the evidence of it yet. He just had that faith that God had given him the answer. Verse 24, then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. You want to see Daniel's character? Well, it shows here. Because you see, smart politicians would eliminate the opposition and the competition if they could. This would have been a great opportunity for Daniel to let the king kill all the other counselors except for him and his 3 friends. By the way, all these other wise guys are the ones that are going to cause Daniel all kinds of trouble in the chapters to come. But Daniel shows grace. I love that about his character. He allows them to experience redemption as well. Daniel showed grace, and so should we. When you think about the conflict, I'll just go with that. When you think about the conflict that we have politically today, wouldn't it be so great if there was grace being extended rather than what we get? Well, let's keep on going. So Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? And Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, or magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. I love that. Such a key verse in all of Daniel. There is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And Daniel goes on to say, he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you lay in the bed are these. And then he says, as you were lying there, O king, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries, God, showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than other living men, but so that you, O king, may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. So again, Daniel doesn't take credit for this. He gives God the glory. He clearly wants Nebuchadnezzar to know that it isn't he, Daniel, who's doing this impossible thing, but it's his God who is doing this. It's like he's saying, King, it's not because I'm smarter or wiser than any of your other counselors, but this has been revealed to me so that you may know that my God, Jehovah, the God in heaven, has the power to reveal mysteries and is the one true God above all other gods. By the way, Daniel doesn't walk up to the king and bow down before him and say, live forever, O king. We don't see that. He, possibly still a teenager, walks in there and stands before him and says, I've got the answer to your problem, king. See, when you kneel before God in prayer, you can stand before any man. When you kneel before God in prayer, you can stand before any man. When you've been in the presence of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, you're not intimidated by any other person. So Daniel goes in there and says, King, I've got the answer for you. And Daniel can do that because he knows he's not going in there by himself. His God is going in there with him. So that's my last point. When you're facing the impossible and you need help, you should remember God is always with you. Some people only turn to God when they're in trouble. And I don't want you to just think of God, who's always with you and who stands ready to help you in any situation. I don't want you to just think of God as some magic genie that you can rub a lamp and get him to help you, but to whom you only go to when you're in trouble. No, I want you to think of him as a constant presence with you in all times, the good times and the bad times, who's always ready to not only help you through the times when you're facing the impossible, but who's also always ready to share your life with you, and who's inviting you to let him share his life with you. It's a two-way street. God wants to walk with you in the cool of the evening, or in the dawn of the morning, or through the midday sun. He wants to walk with you and share your life. And he wants you to walk with him and share his life. I want you to watch this video, and then the worship team will come and lead us in a closing song.